Alright, hey guys, welcome back. So this video is going to cover clipping masks, and we've actually done a little bit of this a little bit earlier in the semester when we did the dual duotone text reveal. Essentially that was a clipping mask, but we're actually going to go into more detail now on how to go about using the clipping mask and what function it serves. So we'll go through two examples here. This first one will be pretty straightforward, and the next one will be a little bit more complex, and I'll kind of use that to demonstrate some of the capabilities of clipping masks and how you can go about integrating the image a bit better. And then you'll have the other two to do on your own. So all four of these will constitute part of the weekly exercise this week. So a clipping mask basically allows you to clip one layer into the next layer. So similar to a layer mask where you're kind of choosing what you want to show and hide, a clipping mask will do something very similar. So this image right here, you all have this here opened up. And what I'm going to do is first we need to make a selection. So I'm going to, let me just get in here. So this is a pretty even rectangular selection. So I'm actually, just to change it up a little bit, I'm just going to use this polygonal lasso tool. You can use whatever selection method you'd like, but just to keep this nice and clean and straight, I'll do this tool here. So I have my selection here. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a clipping mask that basically will only clip the image that I place onto this layer inside this selection, okay? So what we need to do is we need to copy this and create a new layer. So you could Command Z and then Command V, or another helpful shortcut is you could just Command J, and that'll basically just jump that to its new layer. So I'll just undo that. So I could Command C to copy, Command V, and that will place on a new layer. But simply just pressing Command J will do that exact same thing. So it just cuts out a little bit of time and allows you to just do that a little bit quicker. So we've jumped that to a new layer here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to then place the image that we want on top. And I'm just going to use some of the images that we've been working with. Okay, I'll just use this man on brick. So I'll just place him right there. I'm not going to worry about sizing or anything right now. I'm just going to hit OK. I mean, it's all contained in the same image here. And then what you're going to do is now we're going to create the clipping mask. So you can come up to Layer and Clipping Mask, or Option Command G, or Alt Control G if you're on the PC. But we're going to create the clipping mask. And what that does is the current layer that I was on, the man on brick, will clip to the layer that's directly underneath it. And you know there's a clipping mask now because this layer that's underneath will be underlined. And this tells you that this is a clipping mask, and you can see the little arrow kind of pointing down. So this lets you know there's a clipping mask in play. And I can, now that I'm still on this man on brick layer, I can Command T, and I can move things around now, and I can resize this as I need to. So I'm just going to kind of resize that like so. Okay, so pretty easy, right? Plain and simple, not much to this image right here. If we wanted to, there's a little bit of this reflection right here. We could try to replicate this and bring this down here, this light and the dark. We could create a selection right here and set the opacity to lighten that, but I'll show you in the next one how we can kind of play with that authenticity of that clipping mask on the next one. So that's the first one there, pretty easy. Okay, so moving on to the next one here. So this one's a little bit more complicated. It's not quite the same. It's not quite the same angle. So if we remember, if we look at this one, right, we could see we're perpendicular to the screen. So all of these angles are nice and clean and right angles. Here the TV's tilted a little bit, so that plane, that angle is a little bit different. We have to account for that. The screen here has some static and some noise happening. We have to account for that as well too. So what we're going to do is we're going to make our selection here. And I'm just going to use the quick selection tool, and again, you could come in here and spend a bit more time for the sake of the exercise here. I'm just going a little bit quickly. I suspect that when I actually make this, when I actually put the clipping mask in here, I'll have a little bit of this contrast on the outside, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. But you guys, I would expect to clean that up a bit. So we have our selection, and we can now Command J to jump that to the next layer. So the way that clipping masks work is it's only going to clip into what's on the layer that's active, right? So we want everything else taken out, right? We want to make sure that there's nothing else on the layer except what we had selected. That way the clipping mask will just clip right into that, okay? So we have our 2 layers here, and then I'm going to come up to Place Embedded, and I'm just using these pixel images that we already have been working with. So I'm just going to take this, our angry man, and I'm not going to worry too much about sizing anything right now. I'm just going to hit OK, and I'm going to come up to Layer and Create Clipping Mask again. So it's Option Command G or Alt Control G for PC users. So there we go, that clips right into there. But we can see, right, this rectangle is on a plane that's perpendicular to us, but that television is angled a little bit away. So I'm going to just resize this a little bit, kind of get it to there. And then here's where we'll come up to Edit, and then Transform, and we're going to go to Distort here. You can play around with these on your own time here, but Distort is what I would start with. And we're just going to grab the corners and move the corners into where the corner of this plane would be. Now the screen's rounded and it's a little bit bowed, so it's not going to be perfect, but notice how as I move the corners, everything else stays stationary, so it's going to align itself to the plane. Okay, so there we go. That's a bit better. But there's one more adjustment we're going to do. So once we kind of get that the way we want it, we're going to come back to Edit, back to Transform, and now we're going to use Warp. And Warp is going to create a grid that I can grab these individual, what would you call, anchor points on the perimeter, or I can grab each one of these planes individually. So I'm just going to click the middle right here, and I'm just going to bring that out a little bit, just to emphasize that that screen is bowed. And you can see these, you can see the grid lines are kind of warping a little bit, and they're changing, and they're going with the surface contour of that screen. And then I'm going to grab these corners, and I'm going to take these in just a little bit more, a little bit closer, to really just help sell that illusion of that curvature. Okay. Okay. So that looks okay. That looks pretty good. And it still doesn't look correct though, because again, it's a bit too crisp, and that static and that fuzz isn't accounted for yet. So what we're going to do is this layer that we have here, that was our original selection. What I want to do is I want to copy that and put that above the actual Angry Man image, and then adjust the opacity a bit. So the first thing is we're going to Command J, which is going to jump that onto its own layer. But notice that the copy, which went above, is now directly below the Angry Man. And now the copy has the underline. So the Angry Man is now clipped to this layer, not the layer that originally was. So just be careful. If you start moving things around, just know that, well, if I do try to move this layer right here, it's going to undo the clipping mask. So let's just come down to this layer 1, and then we're going to just move that up above. And notice the man goes away because this layer is on top. And what we'll do here is I'll take this opacity down a bit, just so I can get a little bit of that noise. But I still want more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to Filter, and I'm going to come to Noise. And here you can play around with these as well, but add noise. That's exactly what it sounds like. We're just going to make that a bit more rough. Right? You can choose between uniform and Gaussian here, and monochromatic or not, but I'm going to leave that monochromatic here. Just adjust that a little bit. So that looks okay. We could maybe try and add some, we could add some dust and scratches if you wanted as well too. although this might be too much. Oh, that might be doing too much. There we go. So that helps. You could come in and you could play with the blur. You could do other things as well too. But that looks a lot better, right? That looks a lot better than what we had originally. So knowing how to kind of work that clipping mask and adjust it to the surface of whatever it's being clipped to, whether it's a curved surface or an angle, and then also playing around with light. If there's reflections or if there's other things you need to consider, things like noise, then that's how we would go about doing that as well. So these first two you'll have to submit to me as well. And then there's two more that you'll have to go through that you're on your own for those, but basically everything that we've covered here in these two examples you'll be able to apply to the next ones. And take your time with your selections and really try to make sure that that image is looking like it's a naturalistic image and not photoshopped. And you won't need to do any color adjustments or anything like that. So just work with the clipping masks, and then we'll pick up after that.